Good evening, folks. This is Andy Pedraza with Special Effects Academy. We're on the start of the week session in the Forex trading room for August 1st, 2021. We will be going through our standard agenda. I'll look at the prior week's results, our currency strength meter for the week, fundamental announcements scheduled, major pairs on the daily charts, a brief analysis, any setups we see in progress, and a few words in conclusion. With that, we'll start out with the ledgers. The long-term ledger had quite a few wins this week, and we're up again. I think we made about 2.5 percentage points on the account this week. So nice recovery after a bad week we had a couple of weeks ago. And we still have trades open that are moving in our favor. More importantly, we have margin available, so we will be adding to those trades as we identify good opportunities. The intermediate term ledger was flat, no significant change. We did have some trades open and closed, but they pretty much didn't move the needle. We had as many losers as winners, but we are in multiple trades that are carrying profit. And the short-term ledger had the biggest gain of about 5%. We had 3 trades open from a couple of weeks ago that we had left open the past weekend, and they all closed at profit on Friday, or rather, I closed them out manually as I figured that was enough of a movement to justify it. Notes and opportunities for improvement. Well, what's going on in the world right now? We have new COVID variants being identified, the Delta variant and the Colombian variant of all things. And there's increased concerns that the vaccines are not effective against these variants. Not that I think they were effective against the regular COVID, but I digress. The U.S. continues printing money like crazy. We've got several motions going on in Congress for that 3.5 trillion infrastructure plan, which now seems to be in the neighborhood of 1 trillion. Not sure why the delta there, but it does seem to be a lower amount than before. Still, $1 trillion is a massive amount of money that's being printed with no backing behind it other than, hey, we can do it. So I would not be surprised to see this add to the dollar's woes in the very near future into mid-range, maybe a year or two out. The Australian dollar, of course, is now officially stumbling, and the Swiss franc, it had a brilliant week, the best week it's had in a long, long time, followed very closely by the British pound. Relative strength meter, and here we can see a little bit of what I was talking about. The euro was pretty flat. It was neutral. It did manage to win against a few currencies, but was neutral or losing against the rest. The dollar, again, slumping. It pretty much was lower than every other currency and only managed to tie with the 2 other losers, the Australian and the New Zealand. The pound had a pretty good week, being beat only by the Swiss franc. The yen was neutral, the Canadian was neutral, the Swiss, again, a perfect week, a complete sweep. We haven't seen one of those in a while, but the Swiss did manage to beat out all the other currencies, bar none. And of course, the big losers, the Aussie and the New Zealand, and of course, the dollar, which we already covered. Fundamental announcements scheduled for this week. We have quite a few events that will be live traded. The Reserve Bank of Australia's interest rate decision early Tuesday morning, more like Monday night. It will be half an hour past midnight. So we will be moving our evening session on Monday into early Tuesday to accommodate for this. On Thursday morning, early morning, 7 a.m., we have the Bank of England's interest rate decision and a few other announcements from the Bank of England. And that same evening, we have the Reserve Bank of Australia's monetary policy statement, which I have decided to trade this time, as given the woes the Australian dollar is undergoing right now, it makes sense to listen in to the policy statement, see if we can gain anything from it. And Friday, of course, is Super Jobs Friday, with job reports coming out of the US and out of Canada. And with that, we move into the charts. So last week, or I should say the prior week, the week before last, we had oil stumbling a little bit and going very close to $65 a barrel after hitting a high of 75. This week was a almost complete recovery with oil ending the week just below the $75 mark. We're gonna have to see if oil can continue rising past that high water mark or not. We will be paying close attention to that as the week evolves. And with that, we move into the currency pairs. As mentioned, the dollar had a pretty dismal week. Unsurprisingly, more surprising is that all these dollar charts are not at extremes of dollar weakness at this point. So the market is still not convinced that the dollar is done, or at least for the foreseeable future, not done as a permanent thing. So euro dollar is very close to the middle of the chart. The euro had a nice recovery against the dollar, but it's still significantly off its most recent highs, which means there is a good to great opportunity there to trade it back up if the dollar does continue slumping. The pound, on the other hand, is doing very well against the dollar. It's in a sideways channel, but is much closer to the top of the chart than the euro dollar, and it is moving up. Had a bit of a retracement Friday, but that's about par for the course. It's still beneath the Ichimoku cloud, so we're still looking for a cloud crossing, but it's a very thin cloud, and it hit it on Thursday and Friday. So if this week continues, it's going to burst above. And then we have that final level of resistance at the very top. USDJPY, well, the yen cannot catch a break, and we're pretty much not covering it anymore. We'll be on the lookout for any significant movements with the yen against the dollar or any other currency, but right now, it doesn't look like the yen is doing much of anything other than steadily getting weaker. It is slightly off its lowest point here against the dollar, but not by much. And it is at support right now. So, of course, it could wake up and start moving aggressively, but it hasn't so far. USD Canadian, the Canadian did a pretty significant retrace almost back to the middle of the chart, if not right at the middle of the chart. And this week was a bit of a recovery, with the Canadian recovering somewhat and ending up much closer to the bottom of the chart. I still think there's a good opportunity here for a continuation of that long running trend, and we'll be on the lookout for that. The Swiss, of course, had a brilliant week. We already covered that, especially against the dollar, and it is now moving steadily towards the bottom. Another pair that, for reasons unknown, was not holding onto its strength against the dollar for a long time, but now it does seem to be waking up. Aussie dollar, well, the Aussie has been pretty heavily hit. Definitely did not have a good week, but it did not have a terrible week either. While it did lose ground against the dollar, it was not a very big movement. It's more sideways than anything else. And the Kiwi dollar is also in a sideways pattern. I think the Kiwi has a lot more upside yet, unlike the Australian dollar, but it has been sideways now for the better part, if not more than a month. And we're looking to see which way it breaks, up or down. Wouldn't surprise me either way. Aussie Canadian finally breaking the bottom of the chart. So we're now officially in a breakout on the Aussie CAD. Of course, we have Aussie weakness, and any hint of Canadian strength is going to send this one tumbling. Euro Swiss, nice movement down, breaking support, moving away from that trend line, but these are very small movements. We measured this last week, and there's about 100 plus pips there, not a whole lot to be had. So it's not the fastest mover, and we would be looking for better opportunities than what this pair has to offer. Euro pound still sideways. It has been sideways since around February of this year. It's not going any deeper, definitely not breaking support at the bottom or even approaching it, but it is just stagnant. EURJPY broke one level of support, established another one, and is now doing a retrace back up. And I do think that this chart has more upside than downside. The yen is continuing to weaken, and the euro really doesn't have any negatives right now that are unknowns. Just the usual stuff. There are banking issues in Europe, and of course, the fact that, like everybody else, they're printing money like crazy, but there is no fundamental reason for the euro to weaken. Unlike the yen, which, well, I don't see a fundamental reason there either. They do have a long running trend in weakness. On top of that, they are having the Olympics in Japan as we speak. And there are concerns, very significant concerns, that this is going to become a super spreader event for COVID. And the amount, or rather the number of infections being reported daily in Tokyo and in Japan in general have been steadily rising since the Olympics started. So that might hurt their economy even more. Euro Canadian, somewhat sideways in general. It is right above the bottom level of support. It had a bit of a bullish run in the last month or so, which now seems to be trying to reverse, or at least going back to the mean. Pound JPY very near the top of the chart, and the last 2 weeks have been a brilliant run on the pound against the yen. It's still off the top of the chart, but not by much. And another one that I think has great opportunities for a breakout. Aussie JPY breaking out in the opposite direction, and this is clear proof of how weak the Australian dollar is right now. The yen continues to weaken against pretty much every other currency except the Australian dollar, where we can see that the yen is pretty much beating the Australian dollar into the ground. Now, eventually, this chart will likely go sideways, if only because both currencies are weakening. But it might still give us some opportunities in either direction in weeks to come. Euro New Zealand is following a very shallow trend up, and I wouldn't blame anybody if they called it a sideways market, but it is making higher lows, even though the higher highs are just not there. It's in a wedge formation. We're waiting for a breakout in either direction. The problem with the Euro New Zealand is that when it moves easily 200, 300 pips in one go, which is very scary if you're on the wrong side of that trade. But there's still it's still a good pair to trade, just given those same opportunities. The potential is there. It's just very tricky anticipating which way it is going to jump. Pound Canadian, the pound doing a nice recovery against the CAD after quite a long period of going in the opposite direction. So it is starting to break up above resistance, still not out of the woods. The CAD did manage to recover. And if we can see there the candles, there was one candle, 4 candles back, where the pound just completely trounced the CAD. And the CAD then took 3 days to recover from that, ending up almost where it had started. But the rise took 1 day, the recovery took 3. So it's still a very lopsided equation there, but it is moving in both directions. Pound Swiss is sideways and very near the bottom of its sideways channel, so it might be a good opportunity to trade it down once and if it breaks that support. As we saw, the Swiss had the best week it's had in a long time. If that is the beginning of something, then this chart has a lot to give. And last but not least, the pound Aussie is another of our breakouts. It's broken out weeks ago and continues to do a bigger or better breakout pretty much every week. Very steep movement right now. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of a retracement, at least back to that first trend line that we see right below it. But it's still a very, very bullish pair. That's it for the chart setups we see in progress. The UK, of course, the pound pairs are maintaining strength. They're giving up nothing. And that to me tells me that the movement has not ended. The dollar pairs, the USD is sliding. There's nothing new with that. I've been I hate to say predicting it, but I've been anticipating it for quite a long time, and it is just happening. The Australian pairs, and another of my air quotes predictions here, it just had gotten too strong. And as always, there will be a retracement at some point. The Australian dollar has already started doing that. And in fact, I wouldn't even call it a retracement right now. It is a reversal. The only question open there is how low it's going to go. Obviously, it's not going to keep on going low, just the same way it never kept on going high. Everything moves in cycles. At some point, it will hit bottom. But I still think there's a great opportunity there to ride the Australian pairs down because that movement is barely beginning. The Swiss pairs, we added the Swiss franc back into this slide, replacing the yen because the yen just wasn't doing much of anything. So the Swiss just had a perfect week. And the question is, are safe haven currencies coming back? And let's not forget that the yen is another safe haven currency. Canada, the Canadian pairs, it's tentative right now. It has gone sideways, a little bit of consolidation, which is very odd since oil continues to go higher. So I don't think the Canadians movement is done. I think it has a lot more to give. But again, trade it cautiously, wait for the movements to begin. And last but not least, our final words of conclusion here. And this is just a general appreciation. Summers are usually quiet in the Forex market. It's the dead zone, the dead period. You can happily go off on vacation and you miss nothing. Not this year. Multiple global events have the currency markets doing very, very brisk trading in what's normally the dead season. Everybody who's used to vacationing from trading in the summer may have been better served pushing it off this time, assuming they didn't. And there's a lesson there. The markets are going to do whatever they're going to do and are on no one schedule. We're just here for the ride. The beauty of it, though, even if you do take a vacation here and there or just step away, is that all you need to trade is a smartphone and an internet connection. I've done a lot of trading when I was officially off duty. It doesn't matter. If I have my phone, I'm a trader. And that is it for this week. That's your start of the week. Any questions or comments? Okay, folks, thank you very much. That is then a wrap. I'll be publishing this at some point tonight. And reminder for those of you who subscribe, as I mentioned when we went through the calendar of events, we will not have the evening session tomorrow, Monday, at the usual hour or at all tomorrow. It's going to be happening very early Tuesday morning, a little bit after midnight. So that's to accommodate an announcement. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. I will see you guys on the other side. Take care.